welcome back to The Other Way. I am so honored and thrilled to welcome my very special next guest, Kris Gonzalez, who is a mother, partner, acupuncturist, herbalist, and practitioner of the nourishing life tradition, otherwise known as yangshen. As the name Way of Yin suggests, we are diving into yin, or the energetic feminine, in today's episode. We are really talking about how the way of yin can be a lifestyle that we as women can embrace. We are going to be diving into the power of 5-element theory, looking at our lives, looking at nature, and also our menstrual cycles as women. We're going to be talking about the cycles that we go through in life as women as well, from our maiden years to our fertile years to our mother years to our crone years, and how menopause can really be viewed as a second spring. We're also going to be diving into our Jing essence and how it is a key to longevity according to East Asian medicine, and what can we do to replenish our Jing essence, and also what are some signs that it might need some support. This episode covers menstruation, postpartum, menopause, and what they all have in common. And we also dive into exploring the topic of impermanence and how transition and honoring transitions can actually be a beautiful way to embrace impermanence in our lives. So if you're somebody who struggles with limbo, the state of limbo, and that state of transition, this could offer a really beautiful perspective from the wise East Asian traditions and also from Kris's own view. This is such a beautiful episode. I am so honored to share this conversation with you all. And before we dive into the episode, I just want to share a special reminder that our giveaway is still going on from now until March 11th. In celebration of 3 years and over 100 episodes on The Other Way, we are giving away a $100 gift card to a very special listener. And if you want to be entered, it's super simple to do so. Just go ahead and like, subscribe, Spotify and Apple to The Other Way, and then leave us a review and send us a screenshot of the review. The email is in the show notes below. It's assistant@inflowplanner.com, and that'll enter you into the giveaway, which is going on until March 11th. So very special thank you for supporting the podcast and helping it grow. And without further ado, let's welcome Kris Gonzalez to The Other Way. What are 3 words that you would use to describe yourself?
I think the first word that comes up is like receptive. Yeah, receptive. And I think now that I've hit the 40s decade, stronger. I feel stronger. Yeah. Receptive, strong, but also gentle. I feel, just gentle understanding for people and experiences and the differences that we have, but also the similarities that we have.
That is so beautiful. I just came back from a 7-day silent meditation retreat, a metta meditation retreat. And just to have you share those words, which deeply resonate with me right now, but reflecting on the space that I just came out of, to have you use those words to describe yourself is so beautiful. Like, we definitely need more people like that. So thank you.
I have kids of my own and also nieces and nephews that are in that very fiery teenagery age. And I don't know, I feel like it takes time to reach that big hearted compassion place. Yeah. Comes from lots of life experience.
Segueing to, and we talked about this briefly at the very beginning, the way of yin. Those who are not familiar with the word yin or this concept, which I know is the name of your business and you say is a part of your life now, could you share a bit of background?
Yeah. So the way of yin feels like an antidote to just like this young, obsessed world that we live in, where we prioritize productivity and just go burning the candle at both ends, where we don't talk enough about the harmony of both, of doing and not doing, that our bodies are so primed and embedded with nature's rhythms that as we do activity, we need to do as much rest. Yeah, so yin and yang, of course, is like one of the cornerstone theories within East Asian medicine. And you can describe everything through that lens. It's what keeps life going through like the life, death, rebirth process, which we all go through on a daily basis. And it's just a way to deeply understand our human experience. So the way of yin is primarily for filling in those gaps of wellness for female bodies. There's lots of information out there for male bodies, but when it comes to our health, there seems to be, this kind of lack of understanding of our experience of being in cyclical bodies, that our experiences are so tied to the rhythms of the moon and how that's so a mirror of like our monthly menstrual cycles. But as humans, we also are connected through the seasons. Our lives are like seasons. So that's why I mentioned earlier, like those teenager years are like the fire element. Yeah.
I resonate with what you shared so deeply around our world is so optimized for that yang energy. I went for a walk actually this weekend with my husband and with a group of older friends of ours. There are a couple of generations ahead of us, and they were sharing how weird it is to have kids leaving the house and to be in this almost like different stage of life. But I think a huge part of they were describing feeling almost like ostracized, maybe at times ashamed, also just feeling so separate from the world here. And I think so much of that is because we do optimize and capitalize for a very specific window of time and fully like who can produce the most. And that is like where so much of our value comes from. Like I can resonate with that as somebody who spent over a decade working in Silicon Valley in tech, for example. It's like the cornerstone of worth in our world, I feel.
I don't think that there's anything wrong with valuing youth and productivity because we all came from there. But that's not the only thing to value. We can also value wisdom that comes from like life experience. And that seems so missing from our modern culture is just like this reverence for elders and the wisdom that they have to share. So I think placing value on, those individuals is much needed.
100%. What a beautiful and different framing that would be for all of society to see as you describe some of those cycles, which I definitely want to get into. But before we move on, I want to circle back to you talk about how the Way of Yin is obviously the name of your business, but also so much of your lifestyle. I'm curious, as a business owner, as a mother, how do you bring this into your day-to-day life? And is that something that has evolved over time, or was it just so natural for you? I think a lot of women aspire to be living that way, but also struggle with bringing that balance to their lives.
I would not say that it came just naturally. It took me a long time to actually reach this point. I would say my teens and 20s were, I was like a hustler vibe all the way. And I think due to dominant culture. And it just is what it is. You have to be part of that rat race culture. And so that's what I ascribed to for a long time. And it's funny, I just had my family over this weekend and we went through a list of how many jobs I have had in my lifetime. And it's 30 plus. And we were all just having a big roar and laugh about it. Yeah, just so many lifetimes over to reach this point to where my body has been sending me these messages for so long, but my will was a different thing. Whereas, like, I was succumbing to dominant culture, and this is the way to make it in life is to push harder and harder and be busy, always be jam packed with the to do list, be the super mom. Yeah. And it's not until your body basically stops you in your tracks and says, yeah, this is not sustainable anymore. There has to be some other way to live a harmonious life. So I've had my share of health challenges. Yeah, so I would say starting probably around my 30s is when I started to shift things. I had kids later, so I started having my early 30s, and that came with a bunch of challenges and trying to be this kind of like super mom doing it all. But your body is the best communicator. And sometimes if we just allow it to have a voice, it could tell us so much about how to actually take care of ourselves. Yeah. But we tend to listen to the mind more, but the body has a lot to say.
I think that for a lot of women, there's fear in stepping into doing things differently, seeing as you, and I also relate to the kind of multiple health breakdowns and then having this wake up call to be like, this is not sustainable. If I might have it all on paper, but if I don't have my health, none of this matters. For you, what was that fear that you had to face, or what were some of the issues that you had to come face to face with to really lean into perhaps operating with a bit more balance of that yin and yang that you talk about?
Yeah, there's a lot of like practical fears like, am I going to make enough money? Is my family going to support me in this? How's my partner going to take this? Yeah. And I remember having the conversation with my husband because I started to just lean into resting more, like on my period days. And we have had these systems in place where certain chores go to certain people at certain times of the week and so forth. And I started leaning into cycle syncing. And at the lowest point of my hormones during the month, I leaned into that more. I took naps and I rested more. I changed kind of the family's diet a little bit during that time. And so he started to notice these changes and he's, babe, the dishes are still in the sink. I'm like, I know, I'll do them tomorrow. Those types of conversations. And then it just started to happen organically to where he's, okay, it's probably that time of month again. And yeah, things just don't happen at the same rate or the same pace. And we just became okay with it because I felt better. I was more energetic. My moods were better. And so it had this positive loop to it. And so there was like this built in understanding on his part because of that. Yeah.
It's also just such a important lesson, I think, in that the discomfort will be there. The illusion of it not being there, I think, is just unrealistic, but that with the shift comes like that rebalancing. I love that you use such a specific example because I think a lot of women can relate to that. The weekends roll around and all of our personal to-do lists go from the weekdays to the weekends, and we're trying to balance all of that. But our bodies don't work that way. And you spoke to the practice of cycle syncing, which I absolutely love. And earlier in this conversation, you spoke to the kind of concept of life cycles. Could you talk a bit more about that? I think we do live in a very linear world, Monday through Sunday. These are the work blocks, these are the weekend blocks. God forbid our period happen on like a Monday or a Saturday when we have all these things we were planning to do. So let's talk about life cycles.
Yeah. Ooh, so let's go on a journey of the elements through the lens of East Asian medicine. Everything in nature, including ourselves, follows the cycles of the five elements. So you have water, then you have wood, fire, earth, and metal, and then it goes around and around. And essentially, this story of the elements is how nature has like a form of checks and balances. So you can't have one element take over all of them. Otherwise, you would have catastrophe, just like how we were talking about the fires earlier. Yeah, we can't have perpetual fire. We need something to keep it in check, to keep the balance, to keep life going. But of course, fire is needed. So if we started in water, which essentially is the root of everything, we can think about the womb as, or the water element being like the womb, where everything kind of gestates. And this is a very kind of dreamy place where anything is absolutely possible, even life. And so here we have this spark of life living in all of this deep imagination. So it's like the womby waters. And so this is like the winter time. It's very dark, it's very wet, it's very fertile. So from this watery womb, we come into the wood element, which is springtime. So we're following along the seasons. So if the water element is like the watery womb, this is where we're not quite born yet. And when we come into the wood element, this is when we're born earth side. And yeah, this is representative of our youth, our childhood years. That is very spring like. Yeah, you can think of all the animals that are born in the springtime. Yeah, and so there's a lot of young energy in the spring. It's reaching up and out of the earth, essentially. It's pushing through all of that earth to come out. So it's very strong. It's very upward, outward, like kid energy, like very go. So from there, the wood element provides like a sort of kindling or fuel for the fire element, which is when we push into puberty and our young adulthood, our budding sexuality. And so that really, the fire element exemplified like our kind of puberty to young adult years. And this is where we are branching out from our home and experiencing ourselves in the backdrop of the world. And it's all about emoting, connecting, experiencing all of that kind of stuff. Of course, we can't perpetually be in fire. Yes, it does. And this fire kind of burns through things. It experiences lots and lots of things. And from that, we create this ash and this sediment. And then that builds like the earth element, all this sediment. And it settles in. And the earth element is really our more stable years where we start to maybe build like a career for ourselves or maybe start a family, build a sense of home and community. And this is like where all the comfort stuff comes in. And there's a lot of abundance that happen in our earth years. But here again, we can't perpetually accumulate. It becomes a little stifling sometimes. And so when we reach a certain age, we reach a point to where we're starting to assess like what we have and starting to determine, is this where what I want? Is this how I want the rest of my life to go? So you start kind of these discernment questions, which brings you into the metal element, where we're starting to prune our garden to really ask the questions of, is this bringing value to my life? You're going through a rite of passage during our metal years, which is perimenopause essentially, where things are starting to feel too accumulated, too stifling, too overbearing. And so you start to prune your garden to find like the gems of your harvest and what you truly value in life, and then live according to those values. And that's what perimenopause years or your metal years are really about. Then from there, you come to these pearls, essentially, pearls of wisdom. You've gone through this rite of passage of really discerning so many things in your life to where you come back to the water element in your water years, which are your elder years. Yeah.
So you come back to that in your elder years.
Yes, but it doesn't end there. In East Asian medicine, the water years, which are your elder years, are where you get to dream again and to really imagine, because now your energy is not cooped up in reproductive purposes. You are welcoming in and celebrating the death of your reproductive cycles, this ability that you've had for years. And there's a lot of grief in that, but there could also be some celebration in that. A lot of your energetic efforts are not tied up in that anymore, to where you've almost reclaimed that energy and you get to vision again and really just imagine how you want to live the second half of your life. So from the water, you go back into wood, and that's what's called your second spring. Yeah.
Whoa. Okay. Mind totally blown here because I've never actually heard it explained like this. And I'm having this like micro macro moment happening, which is there are obvious parallels here, right, between the seasons and then also our own monthly cycles as women. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the life cycles, right? But we have so many concentric circles that also resonate deeply with the elements and the seasons. So our monthly menstrual cycles also has this blueprint where every single month we're going through the same thing. And so it really feels like we're primed so deeply to go through these rites of passages. So every month we have our water phase, which is our period days, where we're the lowest in our hormones that we will be all month long. And so that is our inner winter time. That's where our bodies are really calling us to rest just a little bit more. It doesn't mean that you have to stop everything that you're doing, cancel all your plans, and go into a cave, even though that would be very nice. But it's this real opportunity to heed your body's call for a little bit of rest and restoration. And just doing that will reap benefits all around the cycle. And essentially, what you're doing is you're reserving your energy, you're rebuilding your stores of energy, you're rooting in, you're wintering well, essentially. And then that creates like deeper roots for you to grow into the springtime and have like sprouts that are not like what they call leggy and growing too fast without those deep roots. It's a rooted growth versus a quick growth.
So I think this is actually so important because I remember reading about this vaguely when studying some Chinese medicine. When I left tech, I spent a year studying Chinese medicine, actually 2 years. I love the foundations, but I'm not too fond of needles, so there's that. We'll set that aside for now. I love acupuncture myself, but yes. But one of the things that blew my mind was this concept of, and I think you just spoke to it, this rootedness that can come from conserving our energy, right? Can you talk a bit about that? Because in our society, like we even have the phrase burning the candles at both ends, right? And it feels like it's like an optimizing. But I remember just having this complete shift in perspective of no, like I'm depleting something, like something that maybe I see now, maybe I will see it next month, maybe I'll see it years from now. I would love if you could touch on that.
Yeah. So what you're speaking to is what we call Jing essence. And you can think of Jing essence as it's the most densest aspect of our physical self. You can think of it as DNA, but it's so much more than that. It basically determines the trajectory of your lifespan and the quality of your life. It is two aspects to it. So you have what's called pre heaven essence, which is like everything that you inherited through your lineage, your ancestors. And of course, this is explained through like DNA. But what you're also inheriting is intergenerational experiences, all of the joys, all of the challenges, everything that comes with you. And that marries with the other aspect of Jing essence, which is post heaven essence, which is really built from your life experiences, your nutritional profile, how overworked you are, if you're optimizing your sleep, if you are in sync with nature. So you have these two stores that come together as your overall stores of essence, and you're basically living off of this throughout your lifetime. And Jing essence is what cycles through the life cycles, and it determines your development, your reproductive capacity, all of these things. And for female, we cycle in years of 7. For male, they cycle in years of 8. And so every 7 or 8 years, there's a shift that happens in your Jing essence where some development happens. And we have a little bit of control and calibration of how fast or how slow we go through these life cycles. And so for females, we have what's called 3 golden opportunities to deeply influence our Jing essence. So those 3 golden opportunities are menstruation, It is post, which is our greatest Jing left at that point, and perimenopause. So just imagine if we had this context for understanding that we have some insights or like this involvement that we can have with our bodies, with our Jing essence, essentially to influence the trajectory of our lifespan. Yeah. And earlier, when you were talking about the aspect of rooting in. So what this essentially means when we're talking about the root system in East Asian medicine, we're talking about the kidney adrenal system, which essentially is our savings account. And a lot of us are pulling from our savings account like a little too often, a little too much by the lifestyle that we have. We are a society that is so used to chronic stress. It's like we've become a little numb to it to where we actually don't realize the consequences of it until it's maybe a little bit too late. But there's always like an opportunity.
I love that you called it a savings account because there's something about, are we pulling from it all the time that we've even forgotten that we're pulling from it? And it's our constant state. But there's also something so empowering about being able to stop that and perhaps make a different choice and invest into the savings account with that care and that nourishment that you spend a lot of time talking about.
Yeah, that's that yin aspect, the way of yin, where we strive to live more Jing centered, essentially.
So, you talk about these three golden opportunities, and are those just points that are more optimal for investment, or it's just points where there's a lot of depletion, and so we should be making different choices? What exactly happens during those moments?
Yeah, so they are probably the most, as well as like impactful in the ways that we can replenish, but also those are the actual ways that we know that we lose Qing essence. So it's both of them. So during our monthly menstrual cycles, our actual menstrual blood, that which I read recently, is full of stem cells. I don't know if you have read that study.
What? No, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And so they're starting to study menstrual blood as a deep source of stem cells, which is so exciting because that will shift a lot of the shame around our cycle. There's so much shame and stigma and hiding of our experience of bleeding every month to where I feel like sometimes it takes the validity of science to start shifting some cultural belief. So maybe that's one good thing about science that I'm happy to give credit where credit is due. Yeah, so our menstrual blood is a manifestation of Jing essence. So getting some comfort and relating to our menstrual blood, it doesn't have to be too woo to where you're like feeding plants and so forth, which some of us do, right? It doesn't have to be that. But if you shift your mindset to see your menstrual blood as a barometer of your health, that's a big impact. How much you're bleeding, how often you're bleeding, the quality of your bleed. All of these things are little indications of how your Jing essence is doing. So if you have in mind that this is my Jing essence that's coming out every month or so, we don't want to be shedding too much too often. The act of shedding is necessary to keep the life, death, rebirth cycle going because we have that unique ability to create life, which is so beautiful. So that shedding process every month is a necessary process. And but we don't want to shed too much too often. So that's one area where like cycle syncing essentially becomes a practice in living a Jing centered life where you are monitoring the state of your menstrual blood every month.
I love this reframe of cultivating an environment that doesn't have shame rooted with our menstruation because it's actually such a beautiful sign and gift of our health, as you shared, but also the womb of creation. that is just so beautiful. I think for a lot of women and myself for so many years, my period felt like an inconvenience. And especially as somebody who struggles with endometriosis, I had a lot of pain from the very beginning. It was something that if it fell on a Monday, like it was interrupting school or work or whatever, right? And it's crazy, but since shifting my relationship with my cycle and making some of those lifestyle adjustments to honor the change in energy and nutrition, supporting myself with the right nutrition, my pain has completely gone away. Also, since shifting to pads as well, I don't know if that has an impact. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but that blew my mind.
Just anything that you can do to support the natural flow. So, yeah, it's like your cervix opens to allow like an opening to come down and out. So, yeah, just supporting that process versus if we were like to plug that up. So, the opposite way goes against the natural flow of downward and out.
So powerful. So, the two other opportunities you mentioned Partum, and then would that be the third one? Could you
Yeah.
speak to both of those as well?
Sure. So Partum is like our greatest Jing allocation. So there's so much Jing that goes into conception, gestation, birth, and then feeding your young. That all of that is just so much Jing. Your egg and also the sperm from male, that's also a manifestation of Jing essence. That's why so many traditional cultures around the world emphasize the absolute importance of taking care of mothers in post to never leave them alone, to make sure that they fully recover, make sure that they're rested and that they're warm, that things are circulating, that they are very nutritionally fed with like dense, all of these traditions knew the importance that time so that the mothers can fully recover and then return back to the community healthy.
I'm on a fertility journey, so I haven't had kids yet, but I remember when this first blew my mind where I had ankle surgery a few years ago for a broken ankle, and then after that period of time was the recovery period, and this is like a limb, right? And it's elevated and someone's taking care of me, and then I just thought for a second about all of the mothers out there who had just given birth, like they just spent 9 months feeding and raising their infant baby, and now they've given birth, all of the exertion that goes into that, whether it be a natural birth or a C-section birth, and that's surgery. And then within about 3 months or so, if they get maternity leave, they're just supposed to bounce back.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. It's wild.
Yeah, it's shifting, which is amazing. There's now many people who are changing their careers to be like postpartum doulas, and midwifery is still around and hopefully gets a sort of resurgence. But yeah, I feel like this postpartum time, and that's why I love East Asian medicine, because there's this quote by one of our medical ancestors that basically says that women are at the center of the family and their health is central to where that's how you hold the family together is by emphasizing the health and the recovery of the mother. Yeah, so postpartum is such a delicate window. That is the time where our hormones will be in our whole entire life, unless we go through like a medical menopause where we get like a full hysterectomy and that kind of just throws you into menopause versus that kind of gradual journey into it. Postpartum is just such a delicate, sacred window that really deserves all the support.
What about perimenopause and menopause as the third golden opportunity?
Yeah. So this is, I mentioned before, it's like a rite of passage, much birthing into parenthood, going into puberty. These are all like rites of passages. And essentially what that means is it is a physical, emotional, mental journey. And you are not the same person as you were when you come through it. You're a changed person. You're a different iteration of yourself where you are grieving and you are celebrating the person that you no longer are and the person that you are becoming. So, with perimenopause, this is the journey of coming to terms with the death of your reproductive cycle. So much change happening. But what it also does at the same time is reveal to you some underlying things that have been knocking at your door for quite a long time. But it's so at that time because your body can't tolerate the same things because whereas before your body can acclimate to it, you can pull from your savings account to get through things. Whereas in perimenopause, because there's so much change going on, your body will automatically depend on your savings account to pull you through. But if at that time your savings account is at zero or negative, then you're going to start to feel like, whoa, what is happening? So the changes are happening naturally, and they do with our life cycle. Your body will start to depend on its resources to get you through that journey. But if your resources are overdrawn, then the ride is going to be a little shaky for some of us.
I think this is such a powerful reflection on Jing centered living, which is that when you burn the candle at both ends, you are pulling from your future self. I think about these cycles and the beautiful mirror that the cycles have with the cycles of nature and the seasons and the cycles we as women go through in our fertile years every month. And there's this impermanence there. And I think that it goes at direct odds with the notion that this resource is never ending, right? I can just keep pulling from it or move faster, do more, and that'll be fine. But I think East Asian medicine, as you so eloquently shared, really brings it back home to it's all connected.
Yeah.
It is impermanent. But if you pull from your future self, that is what you're that there will be potential side effects to that. And I think that there's like I think a compassionate relationship with our body that kind of can be cultivated out of this knowing and this reframe about our energy. And I think that's so beautiful. It's so powerful.
Yeah. There's this amazing quote about how menopause begins at birth. And what that alludes to is the continuum that everything is connected. Like your in your menstruating years, those are so deeply connected to your menopause experience. Yeah.
You're in your middle years. How has your relationship shifted with these changes? I'm 36. I'm in that trying to conceive years, but there's also this very real aspect of I'm starting to become so aware of the impermanence of the past seasons and like nostalgic for that. Kind of seeing things from this bigger picture view, how it's all connected and there are these seasons and every season is another season. And you even talk about the rites of passage through every season, that there's grief and celebration. How has your relationship evolved, or what does it look like with these rites of passage, with these changing seasons as you enter your middle years and beyond?
Ooh. Um, I feel like it comes back to your opening question and like what three words do you have to describe yourself? And the strength aspect really comes to mind here. And the middle years to bring a little bit of integrity to your decisions. Metal element loves clarity and quality over quantity. And if you think about the alchemy that happens in these years, you're essentially getting to the pearls and gems and crystals of what matters to you most. And there's so much like settled in that. And to where you know yourself more and you're okay with yourself more. There's so much like more love and compassion to express for oneself and where you are currently and how far you've come. And yeah, so I would say, yeah, I'm in my sixth life cycle. And yeah, this year I'll be 46. So we're a decade apart. And yeah, It's my favorite decade of my life so far. Not to say that it doesn't have its struggle, the things that are coming, the challenges that are coming. I think if you really work on getting clear on what your values are and aligning to those and living according to those, which these years really give you that opportunity to just go through a deep reassessment. That's why perimenopause is so prolonged. It's like this gift of it's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to throw you off a cliff and just throw you right into menopause. There's so much time and space to discern and decipher. And I call it like squirrel energy, where like all the squirrels in the fall are like, okay, winter's coming. So we need to gather, we can, and best acorns to bring into the cave with us and hold those on for dear life as we go through winter time.
I think we need to hear more stories like this because I think about how much resistance in my own life. And when I speak to a lot of my girlfriends, there's a lot of resistance to change. I think as humans, we don't like that change. But as you so beautifully shared, change is obviously inevitable. But even for women, it's actually part of our blueprint, part of our design. And it's such a losing battle to fight that or even compare ourselves to different versions of ourselves. That's just, in a way, insanity. And so I think it's just so beautiful to hear the stories of women who are reflecting on different elemental years that they're in. That's so powerful.
Gosh, if I were to share like one practice with your community, is essentially our monthly cycles are kind of practice for the grander life cycles. And so I like to focus a lot on the winter time, which is our bleeding days, which calls for so much deep rest. We have so much practice in that kind of inner spring and summertime because that's more yang oriented. That's when we feel like super energetic and productive and out there and extroverted. But the more yin side, which is like autumn and winter time, which is premenstrual and the bleeding days, if we were to almost build in practices of really getting to know ourselves during these two times, we'll start to gain a little bit of insight of how it would feel to be in like the longer kind of autumn time, which is the perimenopause time, or the winter time, which is our elder years. So we're essentially primed for these experiences later on. If we start to tune into our premenstrual window and the subtle communication that our body is sending us, like, hey, I call it premenstrual strength instead of premenstrual syndrome, where our bodies are coming into preparing for a bleed. So our energy is drawing inward. Our boundaries are super strong. We know exactly what we can do, what we're not able to do. So to communicate that and to have our boundaries and say no when we actually mean no, protecting our energy, protecting our acorn during that time, because our bodies are busy preparing essentially. Yeah. So just those little like tuning into how our bodies are doing during those yin phases, I think you'll reap the benefit.
That is so beautiful. Kris, thank you so much. I would love for you to share just where can people find you?
Beautiful. Yeah. So thewayofyin.com is the best way to find me. And that's my handle on Instagram as well. Yeah, I do have a maiden circle facilitator certification if anybody is interested in teaching maidens about how to see their menstrual cycles as a barometer of health and how to hold circles in your community. I also do like a perimenopause kind of immersion in the fall time. And then I have a program called the Somatic Womb Path, which is for healing practitioners who are very interested in weaving in the realms of somatics, neuroscience, understandings of the nervous system, and East Asian medicine when it comes to womb health. Yeah.
All of those sound amazing. I will definitely include those in the show notes. Kris, it was such a joy having you on. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into The Other Way. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review. It really helps the podcast grow, and I'm ever so grateful. If you want to stay connected, you can find information on how in our show notes. And finally, if you're curious about inflow and want free resources around cyclical living or moon cycles, check out inflowplanner.com. And of course, for all my listeners, you can use the code podcast10 for 10% off any purchase. All right, that's all for today. See you next time.